In this video, I'm going to show you step by step how do you configure your payroll in QuickBooks Online and how to run your very first paycheck. So if you already have an active QuickBooks Online account, you can skip to the minutes and seconds posted here below so you don't go through the process of creating a brand new account. But for those that are starting from scratch and creating a brand new QuickBooks Online account prior to going to set up the payroll, you want to follow these instructions. First of all, you want to use the link I put in the description below. Now, this is only for the United States, but this link will give you both a 30-day free trial and 30% off for 12 months of your QuickBooks subscription and also the payroll subscription. So there's 4 different versions of QuickBooks: Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, and Advanced. For the sake of this video, since we're only focused on payroll, it doesn't really matter which one you pick. I mean, you do want to go through all the different feature sets that are listed here and pick the best one for your business. Just for the sake of the example, we're going to create a Plus account. I'm going to click here where it says try it for free. And you can actually literally create a free trial without even having to enter a credit card. So then the next step is you're going to enter your email and your password. So I'm going to go ahead and enter an email here. And if you already have an account already created with QuickBooks in the past, this is going to give you an error. It's going to say your user ID, it's already taken. And if you want to continue to use that email that you put in there, you have to actually click on sign in and know your password or go through the process of recovering your password if you don't know it. Okay, so that's a really important thing. So if you already have a login of sorts, you have to use your current login otherwise you're going to have to use an entirely different email. But if you haven't never created an account before, where the email that you put has never been used before, then you won't get that error, and then you'll be able to create a user ID and a password from scratch. So let me go ahead and do that. And you enter a cell phone number because it is going to verify via your cell phone. It's going to verify with a code to create the account. So that's why I said this only works in the United States. If you're outside of the United States, the process is different and it doesn't use this text system. I've never created an account outside of the United States, so I really couldn't tell you exactly what that process looks like. So I'm showing you US QuickBooks and US payroll only. Okay. The next step is it's going to go through a bunch of questions for you to set up your QuickBooks. And you basically just go through the process. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Get Started, and then I'm going to answer all the questions. So the name of this business is Hector's Consulting Corp. Okay, and then I click on Next, and then I'm just going to answer all the questions that pertain to me. So in this case, I'm going to put that I'm new to this, and I'm not converting QuickBooks from another system. I'm going to put here the type of company that it is. So you're going to type in the type of activity that you do, and then you're going to pick the one that makes the most sense. And then you're going to pick the business type. So C Corp, S Corp, sole proprietorship, partnership. If you're not sure, you can just click not sure. You can ask your accountant. If you don't have an accountant, you probably should get one and ask your accountant what that is. But that's going to be valuable later on in the future as you do more configurations, especially when you start doing things related to tax, like payroll taxes and that sort of thing. You have to have that information accurately in there, but you could start if you want to with I'm not sure, but I'm going to select the right answer and then click on Next. Then you're going to put your role. So let's say I'm the owner or partner of the business, and then this is 6 to 10 employees, and then I'll click on Next. And then it's going to ask me a couple of questions that I can, which basically sets up the QuickBooks to what are the first things that you wanted to do first. So in this case, let's say the very first thing I want to do is connect my bank. So I'll click there and do it first, and then it'll know to prompt you to connect the banks. Now I can skip that portion. I can just simply just click on skip for now, but just keep in mind that connecting the banks is actually a good thing. So I'm going to skip all of these initial things. I'm actually going to skip all of them, so I'm not wasting my time going through the long, drawn-out setup here. And I'm just going to keep clicking no, and then and then if there's anything else I want to click here, I can just click on that and then click on Next, or I can just skip the process. Again, we're hurrying up the setup. It doesn't matter if you answer those things wrong. You can always go back into the settings and change any of those things. And for those that kind of freak out about putting the wrong thing, don't worry, you can click on the gear menu on the top right, the little gear button on the top right, and then click on account and settings. And then every single thing that you put in there, company name, type of business, all that stuff can be changed in any of these settings. Okay, so you keep that in mind. Pretty simple, easy peasy process. Okay, so now I have a QuickBooks Online account. I don't have anything in it. I am going to at least create a bank account in which I'm going to pay payroll from, because that's sort of a fundamental piece of it. So I'm going to click on the gear menu on the top right and then go into the chart of accounts. Click on chart of accounts. And then there's an account here called cash. I'm just going to, for the sake of it, I'm going to create a new account and I'm going to call this payroll checking account. So let's just assume that in my bank, I created a bank account that is a checking account that is focused just on payroll. So I'm going to put here that it had a $100,000 beginning balance as of the beginning of 2025. And that should give me a good starting point to set up the account from. Okay, and again, I have an entirely different video which I'll put in the descriptions that talks about chart of accounts and beginning balances and all that stuff. We're not focused on that stuff right now, otherwise the video would be extra long, but I'm creating a bank account to start from. That way we can actually kind of see the balances of that account go down as we pay payroll. And we started with 100,000 because it's a simple way for you to visually see it. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go back into the homepage, and this is what QuickBooks Online looks like. Now we're going to set up payroll. So here under the payroll tab, we can click on any of these employees, contractors, or workers' comp. I'm going to click on employees, and that's going to take me to the employee screen. If you already have payroll set up, if it's already configured, if you already added it to your subscription, because payroll is a separate fee, it's a separate subscription that gets added to QuickBooks Online, then your screen won't look like this. This is sort of like the purchase screen. Now, QuickBooks generally gives you an offer for the first couple of months. As I mentioned earlier, most of the times QuickBooks will offer something like 50% for the first 3 months. But if you set up QuickBooks Online with my login and then don't select any of these things here, actually, I'm going to put my email below. You can email me and I'll forward it to my contact, and then they can override this discount. So instead of being 50% for 3 months, it would be 30% for 12 months, right? So again, if you're actually setting this up for your business, my recommendation is just go through me. It'll take an extra day. Email me. I'll forward it to my contact and into it, and you get a better deal. Why? Because I'm a reseller. I sell QuickBooks for a living. And if you don't trust it, fine. You can just click here and pick the discount, that the option that they give you. I'm totally okay with that. I'm just letting you know, if you go through me, not through me, but through my contacts, you will have that 30% discount. And I'll put my email in the description, and I'll put it right there in the bottom of the video as well so you can see it. So let's make the assumption that you got your payroll set up and one of these options was picked. So we're going to pick this premium version. This is the middle version of the payroll. And I'm going to click here, try it for 30 days. And then we can go straight into a 30-day trial, because I'm actually working. For the purpose of this video, this is a 30-day trial. It's actually a fake company that we're doing this whole thing for. Okay, so now payroll is set up, is configured. Now you have added payroll to your QuickBooks subscription. Before we get started, I'm just going to click on the gear menu on the top right really quick. Then I'm going to go into subscriptions and billings. I just want to show you something so you can know what the different subscriptions that you have for QuickBooks. So I have my QuickBooks Online for bookkeeping, accounting, the Plus edition. Here's the price, here's the discount. And then we have QuickBooks Online Payroll. Here's the price. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you get 30% discount for 12 months if you email me first, and I'll have my contact. You will show up on your screen with a 30% discount, just like this, for 12 months. So anyway, so let's keep going and let's go back into payroll. And now we're in the payroll screen. So the first thing it's going to ask you is get started, and actually walk you through the setup process. So have you paid any employees in 2015? So if you have paid employees, you're going to click yes, and then you go through the process of entering the information for all the mid-year stuff. Let's say you haven't paid employees in 2025. I said 2015, I meant 2025. let's say you haven't paid employees in 2025, I'm going to hit no. Let's say you're just getting started with your payroll for your employees, just hit no. And you might be watching this video in 2026, 2027. Again, your screen will look slightly different. I just happen to be recording this in January of 2025. So right now, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to hit no and then click on next. And then it's going to ask me, when is your next payday? Okay, and then you pick here whatever your next payday is. So let's say it's January 31st. And then I'll click on next. And then it says, what is your primary work location? So I'm going to put an address here. So I'm going to put a generic address and then click on next. Then if they need to fix the address for you of the zip code, you just click on next and accept that. And then your name. So let's say I'm going to put here my name. I'm the payroll administrator, my name, my phone number, and my email. And then I'll click on next. Okay, so that's the initial setup. Very bare bones. There's a couple more things that we have to add. We have to add tax IDs and we have to add information about our employees. All that stuff needs to happen. Okay. So if I follow the process here, I can just follow step by step. Click here where it says start. Tell us about your team. I can click on start to connect the bank. I can follow the wizard, so to speak. I can follow the steps, but I can also show you how not to have to use that process. So in case these screens change, because these setup screens do change, I want to show you how to configure it without having to go through like sort of easy step-by-step process screens. Again, when you set this up, your screen might look a little bit different. That's why I want to show you the screens that are least likely to change. So I'm going to click on the gear menu on the top right and then go back into account and settings. And then in here, really important, I have to make sure that if there's a legal name that shows up in tax forms that's different than the name that I put here, that I put that in there, I'm just going to sort of copy and paste that in there or click on same, make it the same. And the most important thing, you got to have your tax ID in there, right? So you have to have your tax ID, your EIN, because that's information that goes into the tax form. So, okay, once the tax ID is saved, then we can go back and double check that we have the correct income tax form set up in there. And if we have any phone numbers, emails of addresses, we can change that in there. Okay, so we're X out of that, and that took care of that piece. And then the next thing is we're going to put information about our employees. So I'm going to click on the Employees tab, and here's where I create all of my employees. So I'm going to go to Add Employee, and then I'll create my first employee. So let's say this is Mary Roberts, and then I'll put her email, I'm just going to put my domain name here. And then let's say the hire date for this employee is July 8th, 2019, right? Whatever it is, right? And then they're going to ask you questions about self-onboarding. So self-onboarding means, is my employee going to get an email where they enter all the information, upload all the forms, which is really cool, or I can enter the information myself if I happen to have a folder here with all my employee files. So I happen to have a folder here with all my employee files. I can just type the information in there, right? So it depends really up to you if you want the employee to do self-onboard or if you want to enter the information for you. Self-onboard means you set them up with an email, they get an email, and they log in and they do all that stuff. Then down here, you get to choose whether your employee can do time tracking in their app. They're actually going to have a phone app. One thing that's really cool about QuickBooks Online Payroll is that they can view their pay stubs in something called the QuickBooks Workforce app, and they can also do their time tracking if they clock in and clock out through the app. So that's pretty neat. So we're going to click on Add Employee, and then it's going to start asking me the detailed information about the employee because I said that I would add all the detailed information. So I'm going to click on Finish Payroll. And now inside of the employee profile, now just for some context, I'm going to go back to my employee list. And right here in the Employees tab, if you click on the employee, that's where you go into the employee's contact. And then in here, you can change any of the information that pertains to them. This little exclamation mark tells you the information that is missing. So we're going to click on Edit. And then the required information that's missing in this case would be the pay schedule. So let's say we're going to choose, we're going to pay them every other week. And then the next payday is the 31st. And then the end of the next pay period is when does the pay period end? that belongs to the paycheck of the 31st, let's say, is on the 24th. So the last day of the pay period is the 24th. The next paycheck is the 31st. It will know and understand the context that this should be a check for every other Friday. And here it gives you an example of the pay periods that would match, moving forward that pay schedule. So once that's accurate, you click on save and you set that up. And then some of this information is optional, and some of them you're required to put it in there. That little asterisk would tell you whether the information is required. So in this case, nothing else is required. I click on save, so I'm done with that part. So I'm going to scroll down, and the next one with the exclamation mark is the payment method. So I'm going to click on start, and then I'll let it know how I'm going to pay. So if I'm going to pay with direct deposit, I have to go in and put the bank account, the routing number, the bank account of that employee. I actually have the option to split it into two separate accounts, or to deposit one piece and then a balance as a check. I get to choose how much goes to direct deposit and how much goes as a check. So that's pretty interesting, all these little options that you have. I'm just going to put deposit in one bank account, and then again, if it's direct deposit, you're going to enter their information in there. There's this little link here that says direct deposit authorization. If you click on that, it gives you a template, and you can print this template and you can give it to your employee, and your employee will fill this out, and this is how they're communicating to you how they want to get paid. And then you can even include a void check of the bank account, like for your records, to be sure and check and double check that you're paying into the right account. Now, you don't have to upload this anywhere. It's actually not required. It's only going to be for your records. Now, because that takes a while to set up all that stuff, we're going to do it as a paper check just so we can move on with the video here. But most people are going to do direct deposit. So we'll click on save, get that done, and then we'll go to the next little exclamation mark. We're going to click on start here for pay types, and then it's going to ask you, how do you pay this employee? So let's say that this employee is hourly and they are $28.50 per hour. And then it says set the working day. So let's say generally the working days is 8 hours a day and 5 days a week. And that kind of helps you make sure that you don't pay a lot of extra hours, and it helps to calculate the time off, and it helps you calculate overtime, all those things. It's not required. It is optional, but it's something you can add in there. You can also add additional pay types. So if you have multiple hourly rates that you pay or something like that, you can do that. And also you can enable your overtime pay. So you can say, look, first day of the week is Monday. So it starts understanding what overtime looks like. And then you can also add bonuses or commissions into the pay schedule. And these are defaulted in there, but I can click on add another commission type, and I can create my custom. I can call it quarterly bonus or something like that, right? So I get to choose how I want to name this, and then and basically, and the commission, we can change this to sales commission or whatever. So you have the default names in there, and you have some that you can edit. So obviously that's all up to you how you want to manage all of those. Then we have a time off policy. Now this is going to get pretty wonky, pretty nerdy, but your company needs to have a time off policy, right? And whatever your company has, QuickBooks is super flexible. So for example, I'm going to create a new time off policy. Let's say this is the general time off policy. So I'm going to put general for employees under 5 years or something like that. Because let's say employees over 5 years have a different policy. That could happen. So let's say the way this works is on each, at the beginning of the year, they accumulate, let's say, 80 hours or 2 weeks. And the maximum allowed that they can accumulate is 2 weeks. So this is pretty simple. At the beginning of the year, everybody gets 80 hours or 2 weeks. Or you could do it so they accumulate per paycheck, or you can do it, they accumulate per hour, or they accumulate every year, or they have unlimited time off and you just keep track of the time off, but it never runs out, sort of thing. So we'll click on save. So after we generate that, and again, some employees could have more or less. And let's say this employee happens to already have a balance, let's say, of 68 or whatever. So that's what we're going to start off with at 68, and then you're going to consume them, and then January 1st of 2026, it resets back to 80 because we capped it at 80. And then you can add, you can have unpaid time off, maybe you don't have any unpaid time off, or you can add sick pay, or you can add vacation pay. So you have PTO, sick pay, vacation pay. You can just have one or you can have multiple. Again, that's all based on your business, right? How you manage that. Then additional pay types here on the bottom, you can add allowances, reimbursements, tips, health insurance, group life insurance, all sorts of things already preset for you in here, and you can create custom ones as well. So we'll click on save, and that's basically what we set up for this employee at the moment. So these are the pay types. Now I'm going to scroll down, and it's not required for you to add deductions and contributions, but you can add them. So I'm going to click on start here, and let's say we're going to add some health insurance. So I'm going to click on add deduction and contribution. We'll click on the drop-down menu, and then we click on health insurance, and then we'll put that this is medical insurance, and then description, I typically put the name of the insurance company. That's typically the best way to do it. So we'll put here Cigna Insurance, and then the amount that comes off the paycheck. Let's say it's a flat amount of $248.90 or something like that. And this is pre-tax, right? And then if you're not sure what's pre-tax and what's post-tax, this is where you have to ask your accountant, based on your company. And then the company contribution is the portion that the company is paying. So let's say the company is paying $500 worth of insurance. So this person's insurance basically is $500 plus $248 is $748, but the company policy happens to be that we'll pay the first $500 and the employee pays the balance or whatever, right? So again, this will vary from company to company. What I'm saying here, I'm just sort of making up on the spot here. So I'm going to click on save, and then that sets that up. And let's say we're going to do another deduction and contribution, and then we'll do a retirement plan. So let's say that this company has a 401k plan. So we'll call this 401k. And then it's not a flat amount. Let's say this is going to be a percentage of the gross pay. And let's say that the agreement that we have with the employee is that they can put any percentage they want, but we'll match the first 3%, for example. So let's say this employee wants to get 5% of their paycheck taken out, but then the company contribution, I'm going to put it also as a percentage of gross pay, and then I'm going to say that this is maximum 3%. So that way, it's really interesting because it controls both the stuff that comes off the paycheck and the liability that the employer needs to pay to the provider. And then we click on save, and that adds that. So again, you can click on add deduction and contribution and play with these, see all the different options you have: HSA, flexible spending plans, cash advances, loan repayments, wage garnishment, all sorts of interesting things here. Obviously, every employer has their own thing going on. Under garnishments, you have like a court-ordered garnishment, like a tax levy or a child support. That's common sometimes. So you can manage that as well. So I'm going to click on done. That takes care of that. And then there's emergency contact, which is not required, that you can add in there if you want to. So now all my information here is set up. Here under personal info, I'm going to click on edit because I guess we're missing some stuff. So we're missing their address. So I'm just going to make up an address here. We'll put that in there. And let's say the person's date of birth is 1/08/1969. And then the gender is male. Actually, this is female. And then we'll put the social security number. Okay. So 558-45-5869. 558-45-5869. Again, that's a made-up social security number. We'll click on save. We won't be processing anything. We just have to enter that for the purposes of the video. So once there's no more of those little exclamation marks, you should be all set setting up that employee. Here under documents, you can upload any forms that you want to upload, which is great. So if you have like an employment contract, if you have the I-9 forms, if you have the W-4, if you have a copy of their IDs or whatever, that's really important. It's a really cool place where you can add that stuff. You can also add notes about the employee, right? So whatever notes you can add in here and so forth. So a lot of really interesting things. And then here on the permissions, you can choose what they have access to in the Workforce app, the phone app for payroll that QuickBooks has. So once your employee is set up, and again, it's just one employee that has been set up, but once your employee is set up, it should be very close to be able to run payroll. Here in the top right, it says run payroll. There's one little thing I want to do prior. So I'm going to click here on the payroll tax, and then I'm going to go into change settings. And I want to show you that by default, QuickBooks has this thing called Automate Taxes and Forms. Now, we always recommend for people to automate their taxes and forms. So QuickBooks automatically pays the taxes. QuickBooks automatically files the forms. For the purposes of this video, right, I always turn that off because I don't want to inadvertently report to that random Social Security number some payroll and that sort of thing, okay? So I want to uncheck that, but I can still initiate the payments and filings through QuickBooks, but I want to be the one that clicks on pay and file. Like I want to actually press that, which is useful for me when making demos like this. But in the real world, my recommendation is always to automate that. So I was kind of showing you that, so it's just very clear that there's a difference between having it checked on, automated, that comes in by default, or me turning it off temporarily for the conveniences of the video. And there's other really cool things here that you can set up. Like for example, if you need to set up your bank account for direct deposit, this is where you're gonna put all the information about your business and the bank account to draw the money from if you're gonna do direct deposit. So you gotta get that done in order to be able to do direct deposit. Since I set it up as a manual paycheck anyway, it's okay. I don't have to set up the direct deposit, but sort of keep that in mind. Now, the other things you want to look at is this general tax, federal tax, and Florida tax. You want to kind of go through these and make sure all of these are filled out correctly. And then I'm going to go into the next one, federal tax. Click on that. And then which payroll form do you file? So I'm going to pick here the 941, which is the most common. If you're in agriculture, you would use the 943. And then how often do you pay your taxes? Let's say we do it semi-weekly. So basically is potentially twice a week, depending on how often we pay. But basically it means in this particular case that I'm paying every other week, it means in the middle of the week after I pay is when the taxes are due. That's the most common one. If you don't know, you might have to ask someone because you might be in a different schedule. Then Florida tax, because in this case, it identified my company as a Florida company. This is where I'm going to put the tax ID, the Florida tax ID. So like whatever number Florida assigns to me as an employer, and you have to apply to Florida to get that, or whichever state you're in, you got to apply for that. And then whatever your unemployment insurance rate is for your state. So the default one is 2.7 in Florida, but this could be different across the board, state by state, company by company. So I'm going to click on save. Okay, and we set that up. So now we should be already set up with all of this at the moment. So I'm going to X out of that. And now at this point, I should be able to run payroll. Now, I want to make sure, let me just go back here to payroll. I want to make sure that you keep in mind that I did kind of went the other way. I went to the settings, I went to employee. You could also follow these tasks. Like these tasks will walk you through it. So if you use the wizard and then click on next and click on next, it will take you to the same screens. Again, because I know that these screens change, I'm just kind of walking you through the regular screens for you to go. But you can also go through all of the setup screens and kind of like read every one of the settings step by step to know exactly what you wanna do, right? So like in this case, I'm going through the process of inviting Mary, my employee, to do time tracking through the app, for example. So all these guided setups are actually really, really useful. I'm not putting them down in any way, shape, or form. They're just useful, but they're not always required. Like in this case, it's going to take you to a place where it's going to give you a quote for workers' comp, right? So let's say I already have workers' comp and I don't need a quote, right? So a lot of these things, essentially, QuickBooks does try to sell you at some point, some of their services through their partners. So not all these things are required. For example, with the 401k, same thing. Find the plan is to sell you and connect you with a 401k administrator. So let's say I click I'm already covered. So essentially, it's just going through all these. And this is for health insurance. So again, it takes you to the marketplace to sell you health insurance or sell you options for health insurance. So if you already have that, you click I'm already covered. Okay. So again, nothing wrong with going through the settings, but I want to make sure that you know that there's this payroll tax tab and then the change settings, which is where you change all the general payroll settings, and then the gear menu on the top right, accountant settings, where you change the settings of the company itself. So between the company settings and the general payroll settings and the specific employee settings for each individual employee, you should be covered without having to go to their step-by-step wizard. So anyway, once you're allowed to run payroll, you can click on Pay My Team, or you can go into Employees and click on Run Payroll. Either one works. So when I click on Run Payroll, it will take me to the actual screen where we run payroll. Now, this is sort of defaulting 80 hours because I told it that's the default, but I can click on that and I can modify that. So let's say, for example, this person worked 85 hours or something like that. Or in this case, it says overtime, so 80 plus 5 of overtime. So that kind of allows you to see how the paycheck changes dynamically. And let's say they got a sales commission of $350. So you see dynamically the check keeps changing. Now here on the right, there's the drop-down menu where you can choose whether you want to pay via Paycheck or direct deposit once you have direct deposit set up. Since it's not set up yet, then the only option it gives you is the paper check. Now you can also click on the name of the employee here, Mary Roberts, and it will take you into the profile. So if you need to change something, change the address, change the date of birth, social security, whatever, you got to change any of these things, or the rate even, you can do it straight from here. So I like that very much that you can do that. And if you have projects, classes set up, you can actually pick and you can add your payroll cost to a particular project, to a particular class, right? So, and you can actually split it. So for example, let's say that 20 hours was on project A, and then 40 hours was project B, and 20 hours was project C, whatever it is. And then I can click here in the drop-down menu, all my project names. So let's say customer A. So remember, this is a brand new company that doesn't have any data, but this is where you can actually pick and choose, how the job cost all these payroll. So it's a relatively new setting. So a lot of people that use QuickBooks in the past have kind of stayed away from QuickBooks Payroll because they didn't know you can do job costing for payroll, but now you can do that with QuickBooks Online Plus and Advanced. So that's actually pretty neat. So you get to pick how you want to job cost any of these payroll. So it shows up in your profit and loss by customer. So anyway, you don't have to do that, by the way. So you could have just not clicked on edit projects and just run payroll normally without having to get into projects and classes. But I'm just showing you as the example. So I'm going to click on Preview Payroll, and essentially you're going to get a summary of all of your employees' paychecks, the gross pay, the deductions to the employee, the net pay, and the employer contributions. You get to pick here in the drop-down menu which bank account you're paying the payroll from. So let's say it happens to be this one that we call it the Paycheck checking account. So it's going to be a checking account just for payroll. And then we can click on Preview Payroll Details, and it takes me to like a little sort of pop-up screen where I get a full report, sort of like an employer's detail report that I can print and save here, which is awesome. It's amazing. So you get a little preview, a summary of your report that you process. And then once you verify that is correct, here in the top left, it tells you total payroll cost. This is your total out-of-pocket cost. It includes what you're paying your employee plus all the money that you have to pay as an employer. So your cost of doing business is all listed here. Here on the little magnifying glass, you can click on that, and you get to actually sort of preview the paycheck in detail, including the 401k deductions, including the sickness insurance, including the employer cost. So this is stuff that is costing me as an employer to run this payroll. And, what am I paying out of pocket for the 401k? What am I paying for sickness insurance? If there's any time off, how much time off I'm paying. So this is like a sort of like a super pay stub for the employer to preview prior to running payroll, which is amazing. So we'll click on Save, and then I can click on Submit Payroll. That basically completes the payroll. Now it asks you to print the paychecks. So I'll grab my little, my paper check that I'm going to put in my printer. I'll read the check number of my paper check, and then I will send a print from here. We'll actually will create a print, a print queue for you to print that check. And then under Paystub, I can print the Paystub here by itself, which, by the way, as I mentioned earlier, your employee is going to get access to viewing the Paystub via their Workforce app or their Workforce portal. But this is essentially what the printed paycheck would look like, or the Paystub if you pay via direct deposit. This is what the employee sees. Right? They see their net pay, and then they see all of their deductions, the breakdown of all the deductions, and the breakdown of all the taxes. They don't see the portion that the employer pays because that's irrelevant to the employee. So this is the portion, this is the employee-facing portion of the Paystub or the payroll report. Then I click on download payroll reports, and I can choose what payroll reports I want to download. Click on export to Excel, and very cool, I get an Excel file with all of my payroll reports that I can open. So if you're an Excel nerd like I am, I love to have backups of my reports, and every one of these tabs has all of the details. So basically you have a super detailed Excel report that you can save on every pay period. And then you click on close, and you essentially are done. Like, you actually finished your payroll. Your paycheck is done. So I go back into employees, and then I click on Mary Roberts, and I can click up here into paycheck list, and then I can see the paycheck that we created with the check number. And as I mentioned, it's all queued here for me to print. So I can click on print, and then obviously put the physical check in my printer, and I can print from there, which is great. Okay, and then you can go back into the details if you need to. If you're an accounting nerd, you can click on transaction journal, and essentially it takes you to a report with all the debits and the credits related to this transaction. So you want to know, which accounts were debited and how much, and which accounts were credited and how much. So if you kind of think in debit and credit terms like an accountant would, you also get to see the guts, the accounting guts of the transaction by doing that. So let me go back into payroll one more time. And then I'm going to go click on the employee and then click on paycheck list. And then from here, if I made a mistake, I can void or delete the paycheck or edit the paycheck, which is great. It's great to be able to do that. Then I'm going to go back in here, and then I'm going to click on payroll tax. And this is where we now get all of the information that's coming up. So when I click on payments, notice that this is telling me the money that I owe. So I owe in federal taxes $614.07, and I can click on the little caret there, and it gives me the breakdown of how that number is calculated. So I can pay this manually. I can click on pay because I haven't set up the electronic payment yet. Then this would be for me to log into the IRS EFTPS website and process the payment and then just mark it paid. But if you actually go through the process of setting this up, which you have to keep going through the process of setting this up, you can actually electronically pay through here. That's an additional step that you have to do, which is right here where it says finish up. You got to go through that process of adding your bank account, and you have to print the form. You got to fax it to them. There's a couple of moving parts. You just kind of have to follow the process here. But all that stuff will allow you to literally pay electronically, where you don't have to manually go into the IRS website or the Florida website and make those payments manually. But did you see how all these things accrue? And it lets you know when you owe it. So in this case, I owe it on the 23rd of January. And then this one I owe on April 30th. And this one I owe on February 2nd. So it keeps track of everything that I owe. And then I can record the payment. In this case, let's say I actually went into the IRS website or the EFTPS website and I pay directly. I can click on record the payment. And then basically it removes it from my list of liabilities. I'll keep these here, but that just gives you kind of clarity around how that process works. Again, it'll look slightly different when you don't have to automatically where you are set up to do this automatically. And then at the end of the quarter, your forms that are due, like the 941 forms and the 940 forms and the RT6 forms or whatever state you're in, there'll be different forms. Those are going to show up here under filing. And again, they'll be filed automatically, or you can manually file them. And Okay, so that should be good enough. So let me go into a profit and loss report now, so I can show you what this looks like. So I'm gonna go to my profit and loss report. Remember, there's no sales in here yet. So let's do it this month. Click on Run Report, and then notice that my payroll is recorded in my P&L. So I have my wages, my tax expenses, my retirement expenses that I'm paying out of pocket as an employer, my health insurance. So you see how this stuff gets recorded in here automatically. And if you run a profit and loss by customer, if you remember, we job costed some of these stuff. It splits them off by customer depending on how you distributed the time across those customers. Same thing works for classes. So once you enable classes, which are not turned on right now in this file, you run a P&L by classes or by cost center, and you get to see how your payroll is distributed across multiple cost centers. Now, I'm also going to show you one more thing. I'm going to go back into my chart of accounts, and I'm going to show you my register for my Paycheck checking account. I'm going to go to View Register, and we're going to see that there are two transactions here. There's a transaction with the Paycheck, which is a net paycheck amount, $2,037.10, and the actual payment I recorded, as you can see here, for the tax payment. So you see how my bank gets affected. So there's a lot more to show. We have timesheets where you go into New and you click on Weekly Timesheet, where you can actually record timesheets here. You can pick the employee, you can pick the week, and you can pick which customer and which payroll item it's being used, and then you record your hours. And then if you do everything on a timesheet, either on this form or when the employee enters the time in their phone app and you approve it once it comes here, that's called QuickBooks Time. Then essentially when you go run the paychecks, the total amount of hours that should show up on the next paycheck show up here automatically. So let me show you that. I'm going to select another pay period here so I can show you. And I'm going to pick here customer A, regular time, and then we'll put a couple hours here. And then I'm going to pick customer B, regular pay, and then I'll put a couple of hours here. So that gives you sort of a general idea of how this is being set up. So I'm going to click on Save. And if I create the paycheck for that period, so let me X out of that and let me go back into payroll. Let's go back into overview here or into employees and then click on run payroll. And let's say we're going to run the next period. So we'll grab the next period here. Let's say it's this one here. Or let's see the one right before that. Okay, there it is. So the one right before that, notice that these 30 hours came from the timesheet. And it says these were automated because they came from the timesheet, right? So that's a really important piece, that if you enter your time data before, either via the worksheet or when the employee uses the time app that you then approve through this process, then that information comes in here automatically and you don't have to manually put the hours in there. Now, it's really easy when everybody works for 80 hours every 2 weeks or 40 hours a week or whatever. That's very easy. That's great. But that's something to keep in mind, that it's part of the complexity of running payroll. You got to track time as well. I'm going to show you one more thing. I'm going to go into reports. There's a lot of payroll reports that are really interesting. So we're going to scroll down here and go to our payroll. Okay. You have all sorts of awesome reports here. So I got my payroll liability. If I click on that, it shows me all the money that I owe by form. So this is how much I owe in my 941s, how much I owe in my 940, how much I owe in my Florida, and you can choose, the pay date or the pay period that you want to show the payroll liability for. We can also go down here to our payroll reports, and let's go look our employee deductions and contributions. So here's all the deductions and contributions, so you know how much money is coming out of all of my employees' paychecks across the board, and how much we're paying in terms of benefits. So there's a lot of reports. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's a lot of reports. If you just type here payroll in the top, you see that you have all sorts of amazing payroll reports that you can choose later on to kind of see, exactly how you slice and dice all your payroll expenses. So I wanted to keep it as short as humanly possible. I mean, running payroll, it's a big task. It's a big job. I don't want you to be intimidated. It might require you having a consultant next to you, walking you through the process the very first time. It might require you to call QuickBooks and get some help along the way. But just rest assured that QuickBooks Payroll is very powerful, very friendly. It can do a lot. And again, don't forget to use my links, and there's my contact below if maybe some of the things weren't as clear or if you have any questions. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.